Now, in today's podcast, I want to talk about when both partners face Cassandra Syndrome and burnout. There's a version of relationship pain that almost nobody talks about. Not the classic dynamic where one partner is emotionally overwhelmed while the other becomes emotionally unavailable. Not the traditional Cassandra Syndrome framework where one person feels chronically unseen while the other struggles to access or express emotional reciprocity. Here, I'm talking about the terrifying moment when both people simultaneously feel emotionally abandoned. Both partners feel invisible, both partners feel unsupported, both nervous systems are overloaded, and neither person has enough neurological bandwidth left to become the emotional anchor. That's where marriages can begin to feel less like relationships and more like survival bunkers. Two exhausted nervous systems, two isolated people, two partners quietly thinking, I can't keep carrying this alone. And here's the tragedy. Often, both people are saying that sentence at the exact same time. So today, we're going to talk about a rarely discussed phenomenon I call dual neurodivergent depletion. The empathy vacuum that forms when both partners are simultaneously experiencing burnout, emotional exhaustion, sensory overload, and forms of Cassandra-like isolation. Because what happens in these moments is not simply poor communication. It's not laziness. It's not selfishness. And most importantly, it's not a lack of love. It's two nervous systems collapsing under the weight of chronic overwhelm while desperately trying to receive care from someone who no longer has enough internal resources left to give it. One partner is in too much of his own pain to consider the other person's pain and vice versa. And if you've been living inside this dynamic, I want you to hear this very clearly. The emotional starvation both of you are experiencing may be far more physiological than either of you realize. Let's talk about the invisible collision. Many couples understand shutdowns, they understand burnout, they understand rejection sensitivity. But few couples understand what happens when both partners simultaneously enter nervous system depletion. Because once that happens, the relationship stops functioning like a partnership and starts functioning like two isolated survival systems sharing the same house. One partner may be autistic and burned out from masking, sensory fatigue, executive overload, social exhaustion, or chronic criticism. The other partner may be neurotypical or neurodivergent in a different way and experiencing emotional depletion from carrying invisible labor, chronic loneliness, hypervigilance, relational uncertainty, or years of unmet emotional needs. And eventually, both systems hit capacity. At that point, something dangerous begins to happen. Empathy becomes neurologically expensive. That's important. Not emotionally expensive, neurologically expensive. Because empathy requires bandwidth. It requires emotional regulation, cognitive flexibility, attentional resources, interoceptive awareness, perspective shifting, executive functioning. All of those systems begin deteriorating during burnout. This means the very capacities needed to repair the relationship are often the first capacities to collapse. So what does this look like inside the home? One partner reaches for reassurance, the other partner freezes. The freezing partner now feels attacked and inadequate. The reaching partner now feels abandoned and emotionally unsafe. Then the first partner withdraws from pain, which now triggers abandonment panic in the second partner. And suddenly, both people are emotionally bleeding while simultaneously interpreting the other person as a source of danger. Not because either partner is malicious, but because both nervous systems are trapped in threat physiology. This is the empathy vacuum, and it can become one of the loneliest relational experiences imaginable. Let's talk about when both partners develop Cassandra-like experiences. Traditionally, Cassandra Syndrome discussions focus on the neurotypical spouse feeling emotionally unseen inside a neurodiverse relationship. Advanced couples work requires us to understand something more nuanced. Isolation can become mutual, especially in long-term burnout dynamics. The autistic partner may quietly think, no matter how hard I try, I still fail emotionally. I feel constantly criticized, constantly inadequate, constantly overwhelmed. Meanwhile, the neurotypical partner may think, I feel emotionally abandoned every day. I feel invisible every damn day. I feel like my needs never fully matter and I'm pissed. Both feel chronically alone. Both feel misunderstood. Both feel emotionally unsafe. And here's the devastating part. Each partner often becomes so consumed by their own pain that they temporarily lose access to the ability to accurately perceive the pain of the other. Not because they don't care, but because survival states narrow perception. When the nervous system is overloaded, humans become threat-focused. The brain starts prioritizing self-protection, energy conservation, sensory management, emotional survival, danger scanning. Relational generosity becomes harder. Perspective taking becomes harder. Emotional patience becomes harder. Even compassion can become harder to access consistently. And this is why couples sometimes enter a horrifying cycle where both feel abandoned, both feel invalidated, both feel unseen, both believe they are the one carrying the relationship, both feel emotionally desperate, and both simultaneously feel incapable of giving more. And this creates what I call reciprocal emotional starvation. Each partner needs nourishment from someone who is already emotionally malnourished themselves. And over time, the home becomes emotionally quiet. Not calmer, just quiet. There's a difference. The silence in these relationships is often not peace, it's depletion. Now, let's talk about the silent battlefield. One of the saddest things about dual burnout relationships is that outsiders often misread them. People may see two detached partners and assume, well, they don't love each other anymore. But many of these couples love each other intensely. They're simply trapped beneath layers of nervous system collapse. Imagine two drowning people trying to rescue each other while both are swallowing water. That's the emotional experience many couples are living with. The autistic partner may shut down because stimulation has exceeded processing capacity. The neurotypical partner may pursue harder because emotional deprivation has exceeded attachment tolerance. Now, both nervous systems escalate each other unintentionally. One retreats to survive, the other pursues to survive. And eventually, both become convinced that the other person is choosing disconnection. But very often, neither person is truly choosing it. Their nervous systems are forcing retreat. The brain under burnout does not prioritize nuanced emotional availability. It prioritizes survival efficiency. And this is why some autistic partners report feeling emotionally blank during overload, even while deeply loving their neurotypical spouse. And this is why some emotionally deprived neurotypical spouses begin sounding harsher, more reactive, and more hopeless despite desperately wanting closeness. Both situations here are dysregulated adaptations, not character defects. Now, this distinction matters enormously because deficit-based models create shame, and shame increases nervous system threat, which worsens the cycle. But when couples understand that many of these reactions are physiological bottlenecks rather than moral failures, something important happens. The relationship stops being who is the bad partner and starts becoming what is happening to both nervous systems here. That shift alone can begin reducing relational threat. Now let's talk about why validation disappears during mutual burnout. One of the most painful aspects of this dynamic is the disappearance of validation. Both partners begin feeling emotionally invisible, and eventually they stop believing the other person even cares. But here's what many couples don't understand. Validation requires surplus energy. When the nervous system is depleted, the brain becomes increasingly self-protective and internally focused. And this makes external emotional attunement dramatically harder, especially under sensory strain, especially under executive dysfunction, especially under emotional flooding, and especially under chronic conflict fatigue. The result is tragic. The very moment one partner most desperately needs emotional reassurance may be the exact moment that the other partner is least neurologically capable of providing it. Not unwilling, just incapable, at least temporarily. This is one of the hardest concepts for couples to emotionally accept because it hurts deeply to realize that, well, the person I love may not currently have access to the emotional resources I need. But accepting physiological reality is often the beginning of healthier adaptation. Because once couples stop interpreting depletion as intentional cruelty, they can begin designing systems that reduce nervous system collapse instead of escalating blame. And that changes everything. Let's talk about breaking the empathy vacuum. Okay, so the question becomes, how do couples begin interpreting this cycle? First, both partners must stop waiting for the other person to magically become the permanent emotional regulator. That expectation becomes impossible during mutual burnout. Neither nervous system has enough reserve capacity. Second, couples need to learn the difference between emotional rejection and neurological unavailability. They're not the same thing. Sometimes a partner is rejecting you, but sometimes they're in physiological shutdown. And if couples can't distinguish those states, every burnout episode gets interpreted as abandonment. Third, couples need to stop measuring love exclusively by spontaneous emotional responsiveness, because burnout disrupts spontaneous access. Some couples survive by creating intentional structures instead of relying on instinctive emotional flow. That might include scheduled emotional check-ins, written communication during shutdown periods, clear overload language, sensory recovery agreements, repair rituals, co-regulation routines. How about predictable reassurance systems or lower stimulation environments, planned decompression periods? These systems are not less romantic. They're survival tools. For many neurodiverse couples, they're what makes sustained intimacy neurologically possible. Fourth, both partners need recovery, not just conflict resolution. Now, this is critical. You can't solve chronic nervous system depletion with communication skills alone. Exhausted brains don't suddenly become emotionally available because someone used perfect wording. Sometimes the relationship doesn't need another processing conversation. Sometimes both nervous systems need sleep, reduced stimulation, reduced pressure, reduced criticism, reduced unpredictability, and reduced emotional flooding. So sometimes the first step towards empathy is physiological stabilization, not deeper analysis. Okay, now let's talk about the hope that most couples miss. I want to speak very directly to the neurodiverse couple here. This is something incredibly important I need you to understand. Mutual depletion can create the illusion that love has died when what has actually died is access. Access to empathy, access to regulation, access to softness, and access to emotional bandwidth. Those are not always the same thing as love itself. I've seen couples begin reconnecting only after finally understanding the nervous system realities underneath the behaviors. The autistic partner finally realizes, okay, my shutdowns were communicating danger, not indifference. And the neurotypical spouse realizes, okay, my emotional escalation was communicating desperation, not manipulation. And suddenly both people stop fighting caricatures. They begin seeing two injured nervous systems trying to survive each other's pain. That perspective shift can radically reduce shame, and reduced shame often increases safety, and increased safety increases regulation, and increased regulation increases empathy access, and empathy access reopens pathways to connection, slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely. If your relationship currently feels emotionally barren, if you both feel alone, you're both feeling exhausted, if you both secretly believe, I can't keep doing this, I want you to know something. Two depleted nervous systems can absolutely create devastating relational pain. But pain is not proof that love never existed. And burnout is not proof that either partner is fundamentally broken. Sometimes two overwhelmed people simply lose access to each other while trying to survive overwhelming internal realities at the same time. Now, the goal here is not perfection. The goal is learning how to stop interpreting nervous system collapse as moral failure. Because when couples begin understanding the physiology behind the pain, blame softens. And when blame softens, space for compassion can slowly return. Not overnight, but enough to begin rebuilding safety together. And for many couples, that's the moment the silent battlefield finally begins to quiet down. If this resonates, comment. I will read and respond to your comment. Also, please like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video. Would you like to schedule a paid private coaching session? This will be in the form of a face-to-face Zoom call. Underneath any of my videos, you'll see this Calendly link. If you click on that link, it'll open up my calendar. You can pick the available days and times that works for your schedule. You'll get a follow-up email immediately after purchasing a session that will have the Zoom link that coincides with the day and time that you picked. I will get an email too that you scheduled a session, and I will be available on that exact day and time, and we will talk. I look forward to working with you. Hey guys, this is Mark. Some of you may not know that I have a lot of books on Amazon. So if you like my videos, you'll like my books. I have several for ASD spouses, for NT spouses, and for the neurodiverse couple. Underneath any of my videos, you'll see this link. Feel free to click on that link and see what's available. I'm sure you'll find something that applies to you. So if you're struggling in your neurodiverse marriage, help is available, one click away.